Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I am with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 6, 7, and 8 of A to Z Mysteries, The Ninth Nugget. Written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, published by Random House, New York. Chapter 6. The horses clip-clopped along in a single file. Barney seemed to know where he was going, and the others followed. Judd, riding Bullet, was last in line. Soon the riders entered a meadow. A blue pond nestled among the wildflowers. Josh's horse stopped under a pine tree and began nibbling a patch of weeds. "We can let 'em graze here," Judd said. He helped the kids dismount, and the riders tied their horses where they could reach grass and shade. "This is awesome," Josh said. "Folks around here call it Paradise Meadow," Judd said. "There's fat trout in the pond if you'd like to feed them." From his saddlebag pocket, he pulled a bag of breadcrumbs from lunch. "Just sprinkle it on the surface and they'll come." "Will you teach me to throw a lasso?" Josh asked Judd. "Ask Thumbs when he gets here," Judd said. "He's the rope expert." Judd tipped his head back and looked at the sky. A few dark clouds were mixed with white ones. "There's rain coming," he said. "You'll find ponchos in your saddlebags, just in case. Storms come up pretty fast in these foothills." "Can you identify any of these flowers?" Bonnie asked. Judd grinned. "All of 'em. Tell you what, I'll take whoever wants to on a little nature hike." "We'd enjoy that," said Bonnie. Judd looked at the kids. "You want to come along or wait here for Thumbs?" "I want to feed the fish," Ruth Rose said. "Me too," said Dink, reaching for the bag. "Can I borrow your rope?" Josh asked. "Maybe I'll lasso a fish." Judd handed Josh his rope. "Thumbs will make you a rodeo star in no time," he said. "We won't be far off." Judd, Seth, and Bonnie hiked toward the other end of the meadow. The kids walked to the edge of the pond. Dink yanked off his sneakers and waded in the water while Ruth Rose tossed crumbs. Almost immediately, trout gathered and gobbled them up. "Watch this," Josh said. He made a loop in Judd's lasso and tossed it at a tree stump. The loop crumpled in midair and flopped to the ground. "How did the cowboys do it?" Josh muttered, gathering in the rope to try again. Just then, hoofbeats sounded behind the kids. They turned to see Thumbs riding into the meadow on a big black horse. "Hi, Thumbs," Dink and Ruth Rose said together. Thumbs nodded but didn't answer. He dismounted and tied his horse near the others. "Are you going to ask him how to show you how to use that lasso?" Ruth Rose asked. "I don't know," he whispered. "There's something creepy about him." "Don't be silly," Ruth Rose said. She walked over to Thumbs and said, "Josh wants you to show him how to throw a lasso." Thumbs glanced behind her where Josh was trying to coil the rope. "I suspect maybe I can," Thumbs answered. His dark eyes swept the meadow. "Where's everyone at?" "Judd took Mr. and Mrs. Clyde on a nature hike," Dink said. Thumbs grunted. Then he walked over to Josh, took the rope, and quickly formed a large circle. He swung the loop over his head 3 times, then let it fly. The lasso whistled through the air and landed around the stump. "How'd you do that?" Josh asked. "It's all fingers and wrist," Thumbs said. He showed Josh how to hold the rope just as Judd and Clyde's appeared. "Storm's moving in faster than I thought it would," Judd said. "We'd better head back to the ranch. Sorry to cut this short, folks." Overhead, the few dark clouds had formed a wall of thunderheads. They were blowing out of the north, casting moving shadows over the meadow. Within minutes, they were all saddled up, wearing yellow hooded ponchos. Thumbs led this time, with Judd at the back of the line. The sunny day had turned windy and cool. Sudden rain splashed through the trees. Dink felt and heard the drops as they splashed on his head and shoulders. 30 minutes later, 7 wet horses carried their riders into the barn. "I'll unsaddle Blackie for you," Judd told Thumbs. "Why don't you let Lulu know we're back so she can rustle up some hot chocolate and cookies?" Thumbs jumped to the ground, handed Blackie's reins to Judd, and jogged toward the main house. The rain had almost stopped, and a stiff wind was blowing the clouds past. Everyone dismounted and led the horses into the barn. Suddenly, the dinner bell began to peal. "Why is Lulu ringing now?" Judd said. "It's nowhere near supper time." When the clanging didn't stop, Judd ran toward the barn door. Chapter 7. The Clydes and the 3 kids hurried after Judd. As they ran across the yard, the ranch truck pulled into the driveway. Ma and Pa hopped out carrying bags of groceries. "What's going on?" Pa asked Judd. "Someone rang the bell," Judd answered, leaping up the porch steps. There was no one on the porch, but the bell was still swinging. "Judd, get in here!" Thumbs yelled from inside the house. "I'm in the office." Judd sprinted through the screen door with everyone else following. 9 people crowded into the small office. Thumbs was kneeling on the floor in front of Lulu, who was gagged and tied to a chair. While Thumbs untied the knots, Ma removed the gag. Pa was already on the phone calling the sheriff. "What happened to you?" Ma asked. "The safe!" Lulu cried, pointing. The safe door was wide open, revealing a stack of papers and 1 green account book. The only thing missing was Josh's nugget. "They got my gold!" Josh yelled. "Can I have some water?" Lulu asked. She rubbed her wrists, which had red marks on them from the rope. Bonnie ran to get water while Lulu told her story. "I was in here watering the plants," she said, "when someone grabbed me and shoved me into this chair. I started to yell, so he gagged me, then tied me up." "Who was it?" Pa asked. "Did you recognize him?" Lulu shook her head. "He was dressed all in black, with a black hood over his face. Never said a word to me." "Say, where are Fiona and Ed?" Judd asked. "They should have heard the bell like everyone else." "Fiona made Ed lie down," Lulu said. "She wrapped his ankle and I got him a pair of crutches. I offered to call a doc, but he said he'd take aspirin and be fine." Judd ran out the door and the kids followed. "Which cabin is Fiona's?" he asked over his shoulder. "That one," Dink said, pointing to the cabin closest to the main house. Judd thundered up the steps and banged on the door. "Fiona, it's Judd Wheat. Are you all right?" When he heard no answer, Judd opened the door and stepped inside. "Oh my! Someone go get Ma! Quick!" Judd yelled over his shoulder. Ruth Rose barreled off the porch and raced toward the main house. Dink peeked past Judd. Fiona was tied in a chair with a gag tied over her mouth, just like Lulu. Dink grabbed Josh's arm. "Let's go check Ed," he cried. Dink and Josh ran to Ed's cabin. "Mr. Getz," Dink called, "are you okay?" When no one answered, Dink opened the door. Ed Getz was laying on his bed. A scarf was covering his mouth. His hands were behind his back. Dink untied the scarf and pulled it away. "Thanks," Ed said. "Thought I'd be here all day." He nodded toward his closet. "There's a gym bag in there. Look for a small box. Inside is a key. The guy used my own handcuffs on me." Josh found the key. When Ed sat up, Dink and Josh saw his hands had been cuffed to the iron bedboard. Josh used the key and the handcuffs popped open. "What happened?" Dink said. "They tied up Fiona and Lulu too." "Yeah, and the rat stole my gold nugget," Josh said. Dink noticed that Ed's foot was tightly wrapped in a bandage. A pair of crutches was leaning against the bed. "I was fooling around with my handcuffs preparing to show you guys some tricks at dinner," Ed said. "All of a sudden someone dressed in black burst in here. Before I could move, he cuffed me to the bed and tied this scarf around my face." Ed shook his hands and rubbed his wrists. "Boy, those things were tight." "Can you walk?" Dink asked. "Pa called the sheriff. We should probably all meet in the office." Ed propped himself up and stood on his good foot. Josh handed Ed the crutches, which he slid under his arms. Holding his bandaged foot off the floor, he took a hop, then another. "Let's go," Ed said. "Don't walk too close to me. If I fall, I don't want to land on you." With Dink and Josh leading, the 3 of them moved down the path toward the main house. Up ahead, Ruth Rose, Ma Wheat, and Fiona were standing with the man on the porch. In the driveway, a few chickens were pecking the tires on a green and white car. The word sheriff was printed on the door. Chapter 8. Everyone crowded into the office. While the sheriff took notes on a pad, Lulu repeated her story. Fiona and Ed broke in to add details. "So the way I understand it," the sheriff said, "some man or woman dressed in black tied each of you up. Then he or she opened the safe and stole a hunk of gold. Is that about it?" "Could it have been some stranger? Someone just passing through?" Ma Wheat asked. Lulu shook her head. "You can see a mile in any direction from here, and believe me, I didn't see a soul." "Maybe some passerby was hiding in the trees," Pa said. "It had to be a stranger. The robbers sure couldn't be anyone in this room." Dink quickly glanced around the office. Everyone was doing the same thing, looking at everyone else. "Lulu," Ma said, "did you happen to notice how this character got the safe open?" "I couldn't see what he was doing," Lulu said. "He was crouched down with his back to me. But I did see that he was wearing gloves." The sheriff walked over to the safe. "So we can't even get fingerprints. I assume the safe was locked. Who knows the combination?" "Well, I do, of course," Pa said. "And Ma, Mrs. Wheat, and our son Judd. That's it." Sheriff thanked everyone and headed for the door. He handed Ma Weed a card. If any of you think of anything else, please call my office. Sheriff looked at Josh. Sorry you lost your gold, son. I'll do my best to get it back for you. Josh mumbled, thanks. The kids followed the sheriff out to the main house. He waved goodbye and sped down the drive in his cruiser. Everyone wandered back to their cabins in a daze. The kids sat down on their front porch. This crook was pretty clever, Ruth Rose said. What do you mean? Josh asked. He formed a loop in his rope and aimed for the porch rail post. He missed. I mean, the crook made it look like nobody on the ranch could be the robber, Ruth Rose said. 7 of us were riding, right? So it couldn't be any of us. Lulu, Ed, and Fiona were tied up, so it couldn't be them either. Ma and Pa went shopping and got back when we did. That's 12 people with good alibis. So who is the robber? Nobody's left. Josh sighed and coiled his rope. You're close, Ruth Rose, he said. You forgot one little thing. There were only 6 of us riding. Us 3, Seth, and Bonnie, and Judd. What about Thumbs? Dink asked. He was with us. Oh my gosh! Ruth Rose yelled. Dink, Josh is right. Thumbs was with us at the end of the ride, but not at the beginning. Josh grinned. Yep, he could have tied up Fiona and Ed after he unsaddled their horses. Then he did the same thing to Lulu, grabbed the gold, and hot-footed it up to the meadow. But Thumbs is practically one of the Wheat family, Dink said. Why would he rob the ranch? For the biggest hunk of gold he's ever seen, Josh said, tossing his loop at Dink's foot. He missed. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 9, 10, and 11. Goodbye.